I pulled up to the iron gates of the Sterling Vineyard Estate, a venue my architecture firm designed and my personal bank account paid for. I wasn't expecting a parade for funding my parents' $35,000 vow renewal, but I certainly wasn't expecting security. My brother Ryan stepped in front of my car. He didn't smile, he just tapped on the glass. When I rolled it down, he didn't say hello, he sneered. "You look like the help, Elena. You are ruining the aesthetic for the photos." He signaled the guard, a man I had personally hired. "Escort the staff to the service entrance around back. We can't have her parking out front." That was the moment the check cleared, but the relationship bounced. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I did not scream. I did not beg my brother to let me into a party I had paid for. I simply nodded at the security guard, put my car in reverse, and drove away. There were no tears. My hands did not shake on the steering wheel. Instead, a strange cold silence settled over me. It was the kind of silence you feel in a courtroom right before the verdict is read. I drove 3 miles down the coast and pulled into the scenic overlook at Point Reyes. It was ironic, really. I had designed this overlook 2 years ago. I chose the stone for the barrier wall, the native grasses for the landscaping, and the precise angle of the parking spots to maximize the sunset view. My family was celebrating in a garden I built while I sat in a parking lot I designed. I turned off the engine, but I kept the air conditioning running. The hum of the fan was the only sound in the world. I reached into the passenger seat and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, reflecting in my sunglasses. I did not feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like a CEO dealing with a non-compliant contractor. Psychologists call it the gray rock method. When dealing with toxic people, you become uninteresting, unresponsive, and impenetrable. You become a rock. But rocks are also heavy, and if you drop them from high enough, they crush things. I logged into the Sterling Estates administrative portal. As the lead landscape architect for the venue, I had back-end access to their billing system. I navigated to the event file for the Vance vow renewal. There it was, a line item labeled Friends and Family Discount, authorized by Elena Vance. It knocked 50% off the venue fee and covered the entire catering deposit. My cursor hovered over the edit button. For years, I had treated my family's love like a subscription service I had to keep renewing. I paid the fees, I followed the terms of service, and I accepted the limited bandwidth they gave me. But standing at that gate, being told I ruined the aesthetic, I realized something vital. The subscription had expired. I clicked Revoke Authorization. The screen refreshed. The balance due jumped from $0 to $35,000. I set the payment status to immediate collection and sent the updated invoice directly to my father's email. The system would also flag the event manager that the account was in arrears. They wouldn't kick them out immediately, but the moment they tried to order that second bottle of vintage champagne, the card on file would be declined. I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt efficient. I closed the venue tab and opened my banking app. The screen filled with numbers, my numbers. The transfers I sent every month. The loans. The gifts. It was a sprawling, invisible web of financial support that held up their entire lifestyle. I looked at the dashboard, and for the first time, I didn't see family obligations. I saw bad debt. And in business, when an asset becomes a liability, you liquidate it. I cracked my knuckles, took a sip of my lukewarm water, and started the real work. My finger hovered over the first recurring transfer. It was labeled pension supplement, a polite banking term for the $4,800 I sent to my parents on the first of every month. Over the last 3 years, that single line item had cost me nearly $173,000. They claimed they couldn't survive on their retirement alone, yet they drove leased luxury cars and drank wine that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I clicked cancel. A warning box popped up. Are you sure? This payee relies on regular payments. I stared at the screen. They didn't rely on the payments. They relied on my desperation to please them. I clicked confirm. Next was the standing order for Ryan's venture capital, $65,000 over 18 months. My brother liked to call himself a tech founder. In reality, he was unemployed with a good vocabulary. I had funded his seed round because my father told me it was my duty to support the family legacy. I was the silent partner in a business that produced nothing but excuses. I terminated the agreement. Then there was Megan. My sister, the influencer who needed a studio to build her brand. I had prepaid the $12,000 lease on her downtown loft because she said she couldn't create content in a regular apartment. I was paying for the stage she stood on to look down on me. I contacted the landlord through the portal and withdrew my guarantor status. As I watched the scheduled payments vanish one by one, a question gnawed at me. Why had I done it? I am a smart woman. I run a 7-figure firm. Why did I pour nearly $250,000 into a black hole? Sitting in that silent car, the answer finally clicked. It wasn't generosity, it was psychology. Specifically, it was the slot machine effect. In behavioral psychology, it is called intermittent reinforcement. It is the most addictive pattern of behavior known to man. If a slot machine gave you money every time you pulled the lever, you would get bored. If it never gave you money, you would walk away. But if it gives you a win unpredictably just once every 100 pulls, you will sit there until you starve, feeding it coins, waiting for that next random hit. That was my family. For every 10 checks I wrote, I got 9 insults and one, "We are so proud of you, Elena." That single rare crumb of validation was the jackpot. It flooded my brain with dopamine and erased the memory of the 9 insults. It kept me pulling the lever. It kept me writing the checks. I was gambling my financial future on the hope that one day the machine would finally pay out with real love. But looking at the transfer canceled notifications on my screen, the spell broke. I realized the machine wasn't broken. It was rigged. The house always wins, and I was done playing. I closed the laptop. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the ocean. I felt lighter, as if I had just dropped a heavy backpack I hadn't realized I was wearing. I started the car. I had a busy morning ahead of me. I woke up the next morning to a peaceful apartment and a phone that looked like a crime scene. 42 missed calls. 86 text messages. The notifications were stacked so deep on my lock screen they blurred into a wall of digital panic. I didn't rush to answer. I made coffee. I poured it into my favorite mug, a heavy ceramic one I bought in Kyoto, and sat down at my kitchen island to review the damage. The first text was from Ryan, time-stamped at 11:45 the previous night. Card declined. Dad is humiliated. Fix this now. The second was from Megan 10 minutes later. The manager just asked us to leave. In front of my followers, Elena, I can't post the cake cutting because we didn't get to the cake. You are ruining my brand. I scrolled through the deluge. It was a fascinating study in escalation. They went from confusion to demands, then to threats, and finally to victimhood. Apparently, the venue manager, a woman named Sarah whom I had mentored, didn't appreciate having the authorized discount revoked. When the system flagged the account, she presented my father with the new bill, $35,000 due immediately. When his card declined, she did exactly what security had done to me. She escorted them out. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness was perfect. Then I saw the voicemail from my mother. It was 2 minutes long. I pressed play, setting the phone on the counter. Elena, her voice cracked, breathless and weepy. I don't know why you are doing this. I know you have always struggled with feelings. But to destroy your parents' anniversary just because you are jealous, it is sick. We were just trying to be happy and you couldn't stand seeing us shine without you. I froze. I was the one with the award-winning firm. I was the one who bought the condo they lived in. I was the one paying for the lifestyle they pretended to earn. Why would I be jealous of people who couldn't pay for their own dinner? And then the sociology clicked. It hit me harder than the insults. It's called tall poppy syndrome. In gardening, if one poppy grows taller than the rest, it disrupts the uniformity of the field. The solution isn't to help the others grow. It is to cut the tall one down to size. My family wasn't excluding me because they were ashamed of me. They were excluding me because they were intimidated by me. My success was a mirror that reflected their mediocrity. When I walked into a room, my financial independence made my brother feel like a failure and my sister feel like a fraud. By treating me like the help, by making me use the service entrance, they were psychologically pruning me. They were cutting the tall poppy so they didn't have to feel so small. My mother's accusation of jealousy was pure projection. She wasn't the victim. She was the gardener with the shears. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't feel hurt anymore. I felt validated. And more importantly, I felt ready for the next phase. They thought the embarrassment at the restaurant was the punishment. They had no idea that was just the opening statement. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and went to get dressed. I walked into my firm at 8:30 sharp. The office was a sanctuary of glass, polished concrete, and quiet efficiency. Here, I wasn't the black sheep or the jealous daughter. I was the principal architect. I nodded to my receptionist, ignored the flashing light on my desk phone, which I knew was my father, and closed the door to my private office. It was time to separate the personal from the professional. My family had enjoyed the benefits of my business acumen for years. Now they were about to experience the liabilities. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Henderson. He was a wealthy developer and a longtime client of my firm. He was also the landlord of the downtown loft where my sister Megan recorded her skincare routines. "Elena," he answered warmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Are we discussing the renderings for the marina project?" "Not today, John," I said, keeping my voice light but firm. "This is a housekeeping call regarding the lease on the Market Street loft, Unit 4B. "Ah yes, your sister's place. Is everything all right?" "Unfortunately, there has been a change in my financial restructuring. I am officially withdrawing as the guarantor for that lease effective immediately." There was a pause on the line. "Elena, you know the terms. Without a guarantor, the tenant requires proof of income at 3 times the monthly rent. Based on the application, your sister doesn't meet that threshold." "I am aware," I replied. "I assume you will need to issue a 72-hour notice to vacate or secure a new guarantor." "That is standard procedure, yes." "Then please proceed." "I wanted you to hear it from me first, so your team isn't caught off guard." "Understood," he said, his tone shifting to business. "I'll have my property manager handle it today." I hung up. One domino down. Megan would come home to an eviction notice taped to her door before lunch. Next, I buzzed my CFO, Marcus. "Bring the file on the Vance Tech Seed Fund to my office, please. And get our general counsel on the line." 5 minutes later, Marcus sat across from me looking confused. "I thought this was a family write-off, Elena. You listed it as an angel investment." "It was," I said, opening the folder. I pulled out the contract I had made Ryan sign 3 years ago. At the time, he rolled his eyes, calling me uptight for wanting paperwork between siblings. Now that paperwork was a weapon. Section 4, paragraph C, I read aloud. "Investment capital is subject to immediate recall if the company fails to demonstrate solvent operations for 12 consecutive months. Ryan hasn't filed a tax return or a profit and loss statement in 2 years. He is in breach." I looked up at Marcus. "Draft a demand letter. Reclassify the $65,000 as a callable loan, due to breach of contract. Give him 30 days to repay the principal in full or we file a lien against his assets." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Elena, this is your brother, a lien that will torch his credit score." I leaned back in my chair, interlacing my fingers. "He told me yesterday that I look like the hired help, so I am just doing my job. Help usually expects to get paid." Marcus nodded, slowly closing the folder. "I'll have the letter ready by noon." I watched him leave. It was clinical. It was precise. I wasn't screaming at them over Thanksgiving dinner. I was dismantling their lives with courier fonts and notary stamps. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt professional. After sending Marcus to draft the legal demands, I needed one final document to seal the case. I needed the original deed to the condo my parents lived in. Technically, I had purchased the property 5 years ago, but I had put it in a family trust to give them a sense of ownership. I logged into the shared cloud drive I had set up for the family, a digital repository I managed because my father couldn't figure out how to reset his password. I navigated through the folders: tax returns, medical records, insurance. Then I saw a folder I didn't recognize. It was labeled Sterling Expansion. That was strange. Sterling was the name of the vineyard estate where the party was held, but also the name of the street my parents lived on. The folder had been created 18 months ago. I double-clicked it. Inside was a single PDF file, HELOC, application, signed, PDF. A cold prickle of unease ran down the back of my neck. HELOC stands for Home Equity Line of Credit. It allows a homeowner to borrow against the equity of their house. But the condo was in the trust. They couldn't borrow against it without the trustee's signature. And I was the trustee. I opened the document. It was a loan application for $200,000 from a predatory online lender, the kind that asks fewer questions if the interest rate is high enough. I scrolled through the pages. The stated purpose of the loan was home renovations. I knew for a fact the condo hadn't been painted in 3 years. I reached the final page. The signature block. My breath hitched in my throat. There on the line marked trustee authorization was a signature. Elena Vance. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. It was a good attempt. They had practiced the loop of the lol and the sharp point of the V, but the pressure was wrong. The ink was too heavy at the start of the stroke. It was my name written by my mother's hand. I sat back, the blood draining from my face. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was bank fraud. It was a felony. Then the math clicked into place, terrifying and precise. I pulled up a loan calculator on my other screen. $200,000 at 12% interest over a 10-year term. The monthly repayment came out to roughly $3,000 plus taxes and fees. The total monthly cost was approximately $4,800. I stared at the number. The room spun. The pension supplement. The $4,800 I had been sending them every single month for the last year and a half. They hadn't needed it for groceries or medical bills. They needed it to service the debt on the loan they had forged my signature to get. I was paying the mortgage on my own identity theft. And where did the $200,000 go? I didn't need a forensic accountant to guess. It went to Ryan's investments. It went to Megan's wardrobe. It went to keeping up the illusion of the Sterling Avenue dynasty. The anger that had been fueling me since the vineyard gate suddenly evaporated. In its place was something much colder and much heavier. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. I wasn't dealing with toxic relatives. I was dealing with criminals. I printed the document. The sound of the printer rhythmically sliding paper onto the tray sounded like a judge's gavel. Clack, clack, clack. I picked up the phone and buzzed my receptionist. "Lisa," I said, my voice dead calm. "Cancel my afternoon meetings. And when my family arrives, because they will be here soon, do not stop them. Escort them directly to the conference room." They didn't knock. I heard them before. I saw them, a cacophony of outrage echoing down the hallway. My father was shouting about respect. My mother was sobbing about her nerves. Ryan was threatening to sue someone, though he probably couldn't afford the filing fee. When they burst into the glass-walled conference room, they looked like a chaotic storm crashing against a cliff. My father's face was red. His tie was loosened. Ryan looked manic, waving the demand letter Marcus had sent him. Megan was texting furiously, probably trying to spin her eviction as a minimalist lifestyle pivot to her followers. I remained seated at the head of the long mahogany table. I didn't stand up. I didn't offer them water. I sat with my hands folded on top of a single manila folder, embodying the gray rock. "You have lost your mind, Elena," my father bellowed, slamming his palms on the table. "Canceling the payments, evicting your sister, threatening your brother with legal action. We are your family, not your employees." "I thought we raised you better," my mother wept, collapsing into a chair. "How can you be so cruel? Over a party invitation, you are punishing us because you are bitter." "I'm not paying back 65 grand, Ryan sneered, tossing the letter onto the table. "That was an investment. Investments fail. That's business. You can't sue me." I waited. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I watched them pant, waiting for me to scream back, to cry, to justify myself. They wanted the emotional reaction. I gave them the boardroom stare. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was low, flat, and devoid of temperature. "We are finished when I say we are finished," my father shouted. "Actually," I said, opening the folder, "we are finished right now." I slid the single sheet of paper across the polished wood. It glided perfectly, coming to a stop directly in front of my mother. "What is this?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "That," I said, "is a loan application for $200,000 against the condo. A condo held in a trust that requires my authorization for any liens." I looked at her. "Read the signature line, Mom." She looked down. Her face went from flush to pale white in a second. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father snatched the paper. He read it, and the air left his lungs. He looked at me, then at the document, then at the floor. Ryan stopped posturing. Even Megan stopped texting. The room went deadly quiet. "That is my name," I said. "But that is not my handwriting. In the state of California, forgery of a financial instrument involving sums over $950 is a felony. For $200,000, that is grand theft and bank fraud. Mandatory prison time." "Elena," my father whispered, his voice shaking. We needed the liquidity. We intended to pay it back. With what I asked, with the pension payments I was sending you, you were using my money to pay interest on a loan you stole from me." I stood up. "I have 2 envelopes here. Envelope A contains a police report and a fraud affidavit ready for the district attorney. Envelope B contains a quitclaim deed. I placed a pen on the table. I will pay off the fraudulent loan to protect my credit, I said. In exchange, you will sign the condo over to me completely. You will have 30 days to vacate. You can use the equity I paused, correcting myself. Actually, there is no equity left. You stole it all. You are making us homeless, my mother gasped. No, I replied. I am keeping you out of prison. That is the last gift you will ever receive from me. I checked my watch. You have 5 minutes to sign, or I make the call. My father looked at the police report. He looked at his wife. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled, but for the first time in his life, he didn't argue. He signed. It was the most expensive signature of his life, but it was the cheapest freedom I had ever bought. The ink on the quitclaim deed was barely dry when they left. They didn't slam the door on the way out. They shuffled. My father, who had walked into the room demanding respect, walked out looking like a man whose entire net worth was now negative. My mother didn't look back. She was already crying into her phone, likely trying to find a friend she hadn't alienated yet to crash with. I stood alone in the conference room. The silence wasn't heavy like it had been in the car. It was clean. It felt like a demolition site after the dust finally settles, empty, yes, but ready for something new. In the weeks that followed, the Sterling dynasty crumbled exactly as the math predicted. Without my capital injections, gravity took over. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom rental near the highway, a place where no one cares about aesthetics. Ryan's startup folded quietly. Last I heard, he was driving for a ride-share app, finally understanding the concept of working for money. Megan lost her loft and consequently her followers. It turns out lifestyle content is hard to produce from a boyfriend's futon. I didn't rejoice in their downfall. I just observed it. It was simply the market correction that was long overdue. A month later, I stood on the edge of a new project site downtown, a 30-story tower my firm was commissioning. I watched the crew pouring the foundation. Massive trucks churned wet gray concrete down the chutes, burying the steel rebar deep into the earth. It was messy. It was loud. But it was real. I adjusted my hard hat and took a deep breath of the dusty air. For 32 years, I had tried to build a skyscraper on a swamp. I had tried to engineer stability for people who loved chaos. I had poured my energy, my money, and my heart into a structure that was condemned from the start. I realized then that I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the bank, and I certainly wasn't the help. I am an architect. And the first rule of architecture is that you cannot build a masterpiece if the foundation is rotten. You have to dig it out. You have to pour something new. You have to make sure it can hold your weight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my father, a plea from my sister. I didn't check. I didn't care. I turned back to the site, watching the steel beams rise against the blue sky. I had finally cleared the lot. Now I could start building a life that actually belonged to me. If you have ever had to walk away from people who only loved you for what you could provide, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that boundaries aren't punishments, they're protection. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your worth.